And councillors, can I remind you to speak directly into the microphones. Make sure that your card is pushed firmly into the console. Members of the public, I would like to say that as a committee we do understand that the matters under consideration tonight may well be emotive, and would like to ask you please to be respectful of those around you and of the committee. So now we move to the main items of business. So the minutes of the meeting which took place on the 10th of February 2016 have been laid on the table for the last 30 minutes. Are you content that I sign these as a correct record of that meeting? Thank you. Fiona, have there been any apologies for absence?
Yes, thank you. I've had apologies from Councillor Bob Upton and Councillor Nick Williams.
Oh, he's not well, is he? Thank you. Have members declared any interest before the meeting?
Thank you. Yes, I've had disclosure of pecuniary interests from yourself and Councillor David Else in regards to planning item B3, WA 2015-2451, as Councillor David Else is acting as agent, and as a result both the chairman and Councillor Else will leave the chamber and play no further part in the meeting when we get to that point. Councillor Brian Ellis will take the chair for that item.
Thank you. Do members have any other pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest or disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? None. Are there any updates to government guidance or legislation that the committee should be made aware of, Elizabeth?
None in relation to this agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Have there been any questions received by from members of the public, Fiona?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. So in the event of site inspections being necessary as a result of consideration of the applications at this meeting, these will be held on Monday the 18th of April 2016 at a time to be agreed. Now moving on to the planning application. The first planning application is item A1 WA 2015-2183. This is Innovation House, Douglas Drive, Godalming, GU7 1JX. Vicky, would you like to introduce the application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The application site, outlined in red, is located at the end of Douglas Drive, which adjoins Cattershaw Lane, close to the centre of Godalming. The Sainsbury's Superstore is located to the west of the site, and the existing industrial uses are sited to the south and east. The River Way is sited to the north. The wider site is occupied by a two-storey building with a separate two-storey office building sited to the west, just here. The application relates to units 4 and 5 to the north of the main building. So again, this section of the building is outlined in red. Here is an aerial photograph of the site. And again, the application relates to the northern part of the building, so this section here. This is the existing ground floor plan of Innovation House, and here is the existing first floor plan. This application relates to this part of the building. Here are the proposed ground and first floor plans. The proposal would provide a reception and office at ground floor, along with a fitting room, a treatment room, and an area of technical support. At first floor level, there would be 3 additional treatment rooms, an additional office, and a physio room. The building has a lawful mixed use for offices, B1A, and for storage purposes, B8, pursuant to extant permission on the site WA 2015-0716, which relates to alterations to the existing elevations following part demolition of the existing building and the erection of a 2-storey building to provide offices. Here is the floor plan of the extant 2015 permission. Alterations to the elevations of the building are currently being undertaken, but the extant 2015 permission has not yet been completed in full. So again, here are the proposed elevations of the extant 2015 permission. Moving on to the photographs of the site, the one on the left shows you the eastern elevation of Innovation House, which again is currently under construction. And the one on the right-hand side shows the part of the building that is proposed to be changed, where the change of use would occur. So the matters of principle and technical opinion are as follows. The principle of development. The site is located within the developed area of Godalming, where development may be considered acceptable, subject to its impact on visual and residential amenities. Planning history and lawful use of the site. The planning history is a material consideration, and as previously referred to, the lawful use of the building is for offices, B1A, and storage and distribution, B8. This is a starting point for the assessment of the proposal. The final matter under this heading is flooding. The matters of planning judgment, which councillors are asked to consider, are industrial and commercial development. The site is located within an area of suitably located industrial and commercial land, subject to policy IC2 of the local plan. The proposal would retain a B1 business use for units 4 and 5, and therefore there would be no conflict with policy IC2, as the use would remain an industrial and commercial use, which would be employment generating. The impact on visual amenity, the impact on residential amenity, and parking and highway considerations. Officers consider that sufficient parking would be provided on the site to serve the existing mixed B1 and B8 floor space, as well as the proposed B1 business use with ancillary clinic, in accordance with the Council's parking guidelines. In light of the above, the recommendation is that permission is granted subject to conditions as set out on pages 20 and 21 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Vicky. And now this is a public speaking item. I believe the process has been explained. There is no opponent, so may I invite the supporter, Janet Long, to speak. I understand you're sharing your 4 minutes with the agent.
Yep.
Thank you. You know you have 4 minutes from when you begin speaking.
Good evening, councillors. I'm here to speak in support of the planning application for the partial change of use of an existing commercial building, Innovation House, which is located off Cattershaw Lane. This is proposed to be used for a mix of uses, including an ancillary clinic by my client's Proactive Prosthetics. The application seeks permission to widen the permitted B-class use, but this will not result in the loss of business space, as permission is sought for the clinic to remain ancillary to the principal B-class use. This is because the majority of the applicant's clients only attend for an initial consultation and final fitting, and the majority of the work on each prosthetic is undertaken without them being in attendance. In addition, there's a certain amount of office work relating to expert witness reports for medical records and personal injury claims. Accordingly, the majority of the space within the building will remain within B1 use, including office use, manufacturing and research and development of the prosthetics. In this way, the terms of policy IC2 are not contravened and the site will remain in commercial business use. We thought it would be helpful for you to hear more from the applicants. I introduce Mr. Neven from Proactive Prosthetics, who will tell you about the business.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. I'm a prosthetist, which means by qualification I work in the design and fitting of prostheses. We work with amputees. I think what's very important to understand about amputation and amputees is that as a condition or as a situation, it's permanent. It doesn't get better or go away, and individuals' needs are lifelong. We're a small but specialised business that's set up in Godalming some 15 to 20 years ago. Our staff are local. I'm local and live very local to our potential new office. We are certainly very passionate about what we do, and we're very privileged to work with the individuals that we work with who have suffered limb loss, some in war conflict, some in trauma. As well as supporting local patients, we're very proud to support international patients from overseas, as well as athletes, some of those attending the Rio Paralympics this year, and some of those patients are local to Guildford and the Godalming area. This opportunity for our business is one that secures the future of Proactive Prosthetics and its specialised work, as well as underpinning and providing the future ongoing care and support that those individuals require. With patients travelling from many areas, they use the local area of Godalming, which by its nature being sort of flat by comparison to Guildford is ideal for the disabled people that we work with. So there are, as we see it, many supports in terms of what we are as an employer, but where we support those individuals and where those individuals provide a contribution to local hotels, shops, restaurants, as many of them travel for their support with us. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bolton, do you wish to speak on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As a local councillor, I want to strongly support this application. I believe it will bring valuable and very useful business to our town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this sounds an enterprise that most definitely should be encouraged. It's a very worthwhile occupation that they're doing and life-giving results to people. And too many people have diabetes these days and lose bits and pieces quite apart from accidents. So I think it's very important and wonderful that Godalming actually has something quite so forward-thinking and world-leading. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't heard a word said against this application yet, and I suggest we move to the recommendation. Thank you.
It's agreed. Good. So the recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 4 and informatives 1 and 2, as set out on pages 20 and 21 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
That's unanimous.
Let's hope they're all as easy this evening now. Thank you. Right, and so the next item, item B1, WA 20151933, land at Finch's Acre, Thursley Road, Elstead, GU8 6DG. Tim, please introduce the application to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the application site is located here, outlined in purple. But it is located off Thursley Road, and it currently forms part of the garden and driveway and garaging to an existing residential dwelling known as Finch's Acre, which is outlined here. The site surroundings consist of other residential properties, youth centre and village hall here, and the cemetery here. Here's an aerial photograph of the site, just to help show you, really put it in its context with some of the other surrounding properties. This is the proposed block plan. The application proposes erection of 2 detached dwellings. Each dwelling would have 4 bedrooms. The position of the proposed dwellings is shown here. Access to the dwellings would remain via the existing access drive that comes up from Thursley Road here. The proposal includes a demolition and removal of the existing garaging which serves Finch's Acre, which is currently over here. Here's a closer up version of the site plan which shows you, outlining dotted here is the existing garaging, Finch's Acre here. Parking for each residential dwelling would be provided in accordance with the council guidelines. Also, the resultant parking for Finch's Acre would remain in accordance with council guidance for a property of that size. In terms of the design and elevations of the proposed dwellings, here is a view of the elevations for plot 1, which is the first one immediately neighbouring Finch's Acre. Design would be traditional clay roof tiles with some clay tile hanging and exposed brickwork. Design would take its simplistic form with a single main ridge roof structure running laterally, with gables coming off both the front and rear. Here's the floor plans for plot 1. Ground floor, the normal accommodation. And at first floor you'll see the bedrooms outlined here and bathrooms. Plot 2, largely similar proposed dwelling in design to plot 1. The scale will be slightly different. Materials would match, and again would have a single ridge roof structure running laterally and gables coming off either the rear and the front. And again, the floor plans similar layout to plot 1. Although the properties are set back from the Thursley Road street scene, there is a street scene here view for you, really to help put it in context with the existing property, Finch's Acre, to the left here. You'll note some of the separation distances and really the general heights and design. You'll see in the officer's report that this does follow a previous application which was refused by officers. I've put this plan in the agenda this evening and the differences between the current proposal and this proposal, which are on page 37. The previous scheme sought some larger properties and the incorporation of the existing garage building that's on site. You'll see the reasons officers refused that application. Here are some site photographs. This is from within the site with the side elevation of Finch's Acre here. And you can just see the existing side elevation of the garage building, which is proposed to be removed. So both plots will come in here and here. This is the existing garage building to be demolished as part of the proposal. You can just see the boundary fencing beyond, which runs behind this building. That boundary fencing would be retained. And a view south from within the site, so here the rear of Finch's Acre and the rear of the existing building proposed to be removed. You'll note really just the distance between the side elevation and this building. And again, from within the garden of Finch's Acre looking east, you note the existing garage building here and the nearest neighbouring property here. And again, taken from the driveway to the existing entrance, this would remain, and the two dwellings would go here and here. In terms of determining issues for this application, the site does lie within the rural settlement of Elstead, where in principle some limited infilling can be acceptable. You'll see the officer's report in terms of the green belt and the principle of development. Landscape consideration, impact on visual amenity, as always a judgment. Officers are satisfied that the proposal is acceptable on its own merits and has overcome the previous reasons under the previous scheme. Wider public view of the site is limited given the backland position. Residential amenity, I have visited the two neighbouring properties to the east of the site in helping inform the assessment of this scheme. Officers are satisfied that there won't be material harm caused. Amenity space provision, officers are satisfied that the rear gardens for each property and resultant existing property of Finch's Acre is acceptable. trees. Officers satisfied that the relationship to remaining trees on site are acceptable. And parking provision. The proposal provides parking in accordance with our guidelines for each dwelling and the existing. So I turn members now quickly to the update sheet where just a correction really made to the report. Site is in fact within the rural settlement of Elstead, not Bramley. So having regard to all considerations, Chairman, officers recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this isn't a million miles away from my house. I do walk past the entrance, having never noticed the house at all before. So obviously I did when I saw this application. The actual building plot is invisible from the street. It looks like it's not going to materially affect anybody at all close to it. I think it's perhaps a little bit tight for two houses. I think one would have been slightly preferable, but I don't really have any objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holder.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I noticed that the refusal of the previous application has been because it's overdevelopment. I'll start again. I noticed that the refusal for the previous application was overdevelopment, and two of the objections to this is that they think that two houses on this plot is a little bit too large. I'm just wondering, it says it's 0.19 hectares in size. Can somebody tell me exactly how many square feet that is? I mean, 0.19 hectares seems rather small to me.
The answer is no. Nobody can tell you that, Councillor Holder. Any further questions?
In that case, I conclude my...
I'm sorry about that. Councillor Else.
Thank you. If it helps, just looking at the location plan, I would guess that site is somewhere between a quarter and half an acre, if that helps. I'm not going to break it down to square feet, I'm afraid. But going on from that, as one of the ward councillors, I have no objection to this. The access might look a bit tortuous, but Elstead as a village has lots of little lanes which go off down and serve sort of 3 or 4 houses, and it's all part of the character of the village, and I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation. I'm just wondering where the blue line round the site came from, that's all, but, instead of the red one, but never mind. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. We have very good advice here. It's half an acre. So that's...
or 20,451 square feet.
So you see, Councillor Holder, there is a God. You've got your answer. The next speaker will be Councillor Martin. And before... No, we finished. Well, I must go on to say, Councillor Martin, that I think this committee should congratulate you and your family on the latest edition. Many congratulations. Hope mother and baby are doing well. Hope father's doing well.
They are all doing well, thank you.
Good. Okay, so you do not want to speak. The next... Councillor Lee, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. The very narrow access has already been mentioned, and I sort of share that sort of concern, and particularly during the construction phase, where invariably machines are used these days rather than human beings and spades and so on. So all this construction equipment has to be brought, and low loaders, and I'm just wondering about the inconvenience to traffic on the sort of main road, and then actually moving the various items down this very narrow road. I can imagine there being quite a lot of damage done, and if we have a mind to grant this particular application, is there a condition we can put in about restoration of the sides to the access road?
If I may, Chairman. Councillor Lee, Condition 7 requires the submission of a construction transport management plan. So that will include all of the arrangements for vehicles and plant and materials during the construction phase, including measures for traffic management if necessary. With regards to the restoration of the access track, are you talking about the access track into the site, which is in the applicant's ownership? So it would be at their discretion if they were to repair land damaged within their own ownership. Obviously, if there's any highways damaged, then that would be something for the County Highway Authority to take up with the applicant as a result. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? No. So we move on to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 14 and informatives 1 to 8, as set out on pages 46 to 51 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
That's all in favour.
Thank you, members. The recommendation to grant is agreed. So, moving on to item B2. Page 53, yes. Sorry. Oh, sorry. No, so we're not there yet. This is item B2, WA 2015-2396. Sorry, thank you. We will wait for Elizabeth to come back. Unless she's gone home, and then we won't. Sorry, Elizabeth, I was going to steam ahead and then was reminded it's not a good idea without you. So, back to the beginning again. This is item B2, WA 2015-2396, Old Fire Station, number 12, Queen Street, Godalming, GU7 1BD. Jennifer, would you like to introduce the application to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for the erection of a building to provide five flats dwellings following the demolition of the existing building. The application site, outlined in red, is located immediately north of Flambard Way and to the west of Queen Street. Godalming High Street is along here. There is a nursing home to the west of the site at Jubilee House, restaurants directly adjacent to the north, and commercial buildings to the east. The site comprises a two-storey building which presents a single-storey facade to Queen Street. The existing building is vacant and was last used as an art gallery, and the inspector on the previously refused application agreed the building falls within the non-residential institution use Class D1 as a community facility. This is the existing block plan. The site has an existing area of a small area of parking to the side here, and the building fronts onto Queen Street here, and a footpath runs along the southern boundary here. These are the existing elevations. This elevation faces Queen Street, and this is a side elevation of it. These are the existing floor plans which show the studio, this ground floor and first floor. These are some photographs of the site. This is shown from Flambard Way, so this is the building proposed to be demolished, and this is opposite Flambard Way, is in between myself and the site which is there. And then from Queen Street, this is the building here. I'm going to quickly just go through, there's some planning history on this site. A previous application was refused under application reference WA 2014-1228, and it was subsequently dismissed at appeal for the erection of a residential building to accommodate 6 flats. The inspector for the appeal determined that the loss of the community use, the impact on the town centre, the impact on the conservation area, and highway safety were acceptable and did not uphold these reasons for refusal. The inspector found that the height, bulk, form and the balconies of this scheme were out of keeping with the character and appearance of the immediate area, including the street scene of Queen Street and Flambard Way. The height of this scheme was 12.65 metres and the building was 4 stories. This is the proposed block plan. This application, as I said earlier, seeks the erection of a residential building to accommodate 5 two-bedroom flats. The proposal would include 4 off-street parking spaces, an area for bin storage here, accessed from the front of the building, and an internal cycle storage area. The proposed building would extend up to the boundary of the footpath at the south side here. This is the proposed front elevation onto Queen Street. The height of the building would be 10.24 metres, set over 3 stories, with front gable projections. The proposal would include Juliet balconies. This is the southern elevation from Flambard Way. The windows would be recessed from the face of the elevation, and the roof form would include 2 gable ends that extend all the way from north to south. And these are the rear elevations here. And then from the north, so this is the neighbouring building, which just shows that the building is set back and there's the space for parking at the front. These are the proposed street scenes. This top one here is from Flambard Way. This is the proposed building, and then opposite. And then this is from Queen Street, showing it in relation to the neighbouring buildings, and then Flambard Way here. These are the proposed floor plans. As I said earlier, here are the bin storage, accessed from the front. Here's the cycle, and then the ground floor flat here, flats 2, 3, and then flats 4 and 5 on the second floor. And then this is the proposed roof plan here. These are some 3D visual aids, just to show and help visualise how the building might appear. And on to the determining issues. The matters of principal and technical opinion are the principle of development. The site's located within the developed area of Godalming, wherein the principle of development may be considered acceptable, subject to the impact on visual and residential amenities. The planning history, as discussed earlier, is a material consideration in this application. And the lawful use of the site and the loss of the existing community use. The inspector for the 2014 application, which was dismissed at appeal, agreed that the existing use is community facility and concluded there would be no conflict with policy CF1 with regard to the loss of community facility, given the number of other facilities within Godalming and the condition of the building. The matters of planning judgment which councillors are asked to consider this evening are the impact on the nearby conservation area. Again, the inspector determined on the dismissed appeal that given the separation of the site to the conservation area, the proposal would not cause harm to this designated heritage asset. The scheme presented under this application is of a smaller scale than that previously dismissed, and as such, officers consider no harm would be caused to the conservation area. Secondly, the impact on the visual amenity. Officers consider that the concerns raised within the 2014 application with regard to the overall height, bulk, form and mass have been addressed under this current scheme, and overall the proposed residential building would not harm the visual amenities of the area. The impact on the residential amenity. The impact on the undesignated heritage asset, which refers to the old fire station building itself. The inspector under the previously dismissed application concluded that while there would be substantial harm to the undesignated heritage asset, the proposal would result in the loss of a building of minor significance, and as such attributed little weight to this loss. Officers consider that the benefits of the scheme in terms of the provision of housing would outweigh this loss, and that were permission to be granted, a record of this undesignated heritage asset could be made through the implementation of Condition 15 on page 92 of the agenda. Provision of amenity space and bin storage. Whilst officers recognise the proposed flats would not have a provision of outdoor amenity space, given the location of the flats within close proximity to areas of public open space, such as the Lammas Lands and Phillips Memorial Park, officers raise no concern in this regard. Additionally, no concern is raised with regard to the proposed bin storage. And lastly, parking considerations. It is recognised that the proposal would have a shortfall in parking spaces against our parking guidelines. However, given the existing use has a greater shortfall, and that the site is sustainably located, officers consider the shortfall would be acceptable, and this position has been reinforced recently following an appeal decision at the old post office. As such, the recommendation for this scheme is that, subject to the conditions and informatives set out on pages 86 to 93 of the agenda, permission be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jennifer. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's an interesting application. I mean, it came before us before the election last year, and there was enormous furore in Godalming and in the local press about the loss of this old fire station, which actually sadly doesn't really have a great deal of architectural merit, but for some reasons now that there doesn't seem to be an election this year, that the opponents of the previous scheme are very silent, because I don't believe there's been anyone complaining about this. It's very interesting. I don't have a great problem with this. I think it's a better scheme than the one that was turned down on appeal. I do have concerns over the parking, but I do recognise that we probably can't substantiate any concerns over the parking. I just think it's sad that Waverley has a parking standard and even Waverley doesn't sort of adhere to it. But if we don't believe we can get through an appeal because of it, it seems a shame that we've got a standard that is not appealable, if you see what I mean. But I think I'll bypass that and let Mr. Lee go on about it in a minute, because I'm sure he might wish to address it. So I think overall, I think it's a reasonably good-looking scheme. It does add extra houses to Godalming, and we do obviously need them. They're of a small nature, which is ideal. So I think I will be prepared to go with the officers on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll agree with the sentiments from Councillor Reynolds. It ticks all the boxes for me with the bin storage and that sort of thing. It's nice to see that they've incorporated that within the property. And all the time, I've worked in Godalming for 30 years and lived in Godalming, and it's been empty for a long time. And I think it's about time something happened, and it looks really good, I think. Great. Thank you.
Councillor Tom Martin.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with the development per se. What I do have a problem with is with this parking situation. I will be interested to hear from officers sort of what is the point in having the parking guidelines if we don't wish to implement them. I also wonder if it is material planning consideration where you've got 5 dwellings and only 4 parking spaces. How do you actually divvy up the parking spaces? It's all well and good saying that there are nearby car parks, but if, for instance, it is a first come, first served, you couldn't exactly apply for a season ticket to local car parks on that basis. And therefore I wonder actually if it is an amenity problem for the residents not being able to adequately park vehicles. It's not so much the parking on site, but if you've only got 4 for 5, what happens to the 5th? And is it one specific dwelling is earmarked for not having a parking space, or is it simply a bun fight? And I'd appreciate some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could come back on that, I think start with the second point first. Our understanding is they're not intended to be allocated, so it would literally be the residents having to sort it out between themselves and share them. And if someone comes home and there's not a space, they'd have to go and park somewhere else. So that's the way that these arrangements work if they're not specifically allocated. I think the experience is that's actually a more efficient way of using parking spaces than if you allocate them. And then sometimes there's one occupier not using it, and perhaps another occupier that could use it, another resident that could use it, isn't able to because it's allocated to their neighbour. So it swings and roundabouts in a way, but that's the arrangement that's been proposed, and that's how we've assessed it. In terms of the rationale for not insisting on parking in this instance, we have set it out on page 80. What I would say is I don't think that we are suggesting that the council are making an exception to their policy. We're applying the policy consistently, but what we're reflecting here is the approach that was taken by the appeal inspector on the post office application, which has familiar to members, and we reported it in the appeals update fairly recently. And it's really requiring us to have regard to the fact that where there is an extant use, a lawful use, we have to be mindful of the fact that that use would have had a parking demand of its own, and we do have to take that into account in coming to the conclusion whether or not there is an overall shortfall by the new use. So that is a material consideration, something we live to learn through the Post Office decision. So it is really something we've learned from experience. But I don't think this approach is fundamentally undermining the Council's guidelines. They are being applied consistently and are very widely respected. So I think that there is a very positive note there for them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got. Do you want? Are you speaking on the parking? And you are. Do you mind if I take Councillor?
I just wanted to come back actually, because I think the Post Office site is a little bit different to this, because in the Post Office we had an existing building that was not being demolished or being changed in any way, and only obviously had a certain amount of very limited parking on site. Now this is something that is a new build. I mean, they're demolishing what's there, so they could create an underground car park here for 10 cars if they wish to. I mean, they probably don't, because it's going to cost them far too much money. But I think it's slightly different because, because they're demolishing and starting again, they could create as much parking as they wish to. Obviously, they don't choose to create more than 4 spaces because it's not economic enough for them to do so. Although, actually, if you look at the pictures, they could get rid of those 5 little box hedges and probably squeeze an extra one in. Now, I don't know what the parking is at the moment, because obviously down the side of the existing building you could probably get 4 or 5 cars. So on what's there, potentially there could be a parking for 5, although it's not totally convenient parking because they will have to reverse out if the one nearest the wall at the end would wanted to leave first. But it's just a bit of a question, because I do think the Post Office site is a bit different, because it's not a complete sort of new build like this one.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say on page 56, the fact that the 4 car parking spaces are situated by just outside the living space of one of the flats. There's only one window. I find that a little bit of a worry. If they wish to have their windows open, unless everybody's parking head on, as it were, that could be a problem for the people in that flat. Anyway, that's just my observation. And now Councillor Peter Martin.
Thank you. I think that nobody has referred, and the officers did not correctly refer to the usage of this building in the past. This has been used for many years by small start-up businesses. The sort of movement on from people developing small businesses from their own homes and then moving into slightly larger premises, and this for many years was used in that way. And I think it's a great shame that we're going to lose that. However, it's not particularly economic use of the building, and the building was in poor repair and was going to cost a great deal to put right, and therefore the decision was made that they would go with a demolition and a rebuild. So I think there is a regret at the loss of what was there. However, I think on the other hand, we've got 5 new dwellings which will take their place. I'm less concerned about the parking. We are in the town centre. It is possible to live in the town centre without a car at all. Buses and trains are not far away, and you can always use a bike if you want to. And I think that's a matter for the residents or the future residents of the place to sort out, and they will clearly understand that before they purchase the flats in question. Although I regret the loss of the amenity of the building that we had before, it would be nice to try and find some alternate space that could be used by small startups. I am going to be in favour of this application. Thank you.
And Councillor Thornton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I too, I'm not concerned so much about the parking. You've got local roads. The other side of Flambards Way have got CPZs, so they're residents parking only. You've got a Crossroad car park opposite side of Flambards Way. You've got Queen Street car park opposite Prezzo, and your comment, Chairman, about obviously parking outside your window. I'm afraid that's what you get for living in the town and not in the country. Thank you.
Well, that's me told. Are there any other comments? No? So we move on then to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 17 and informatives 1 to 4, as set out on pages 86 and 93 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
That's 11 in favour.
And those against?
And 1 against.
Right. So, thank you. The recommendation to grant is agreed. And now I have to leave the chamber with Councillor Else and hand over to Vice Chairman. What's left of it? I'm going home to go to bed, Brian. I'm exhausted. Good night. Thanks, you.
Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, item B3 WA 2015/2451, the erection of an outbuilding following demolition of existing sheds at Rose Cottage, Sebastopol Lane, Waverley. Richard, sorry to have kept you waiting for so long this evening, but you are the tail end Charlie. Go ahead, please.
Okay, this application is for the erection of an outbuilding following demolition of the existing sheds that are already on site. You see the site there outlined in red, which is Rose Cottage here. It's a listed building, and there are a number of other residential properties within the area, which it is flanked by. We see the site here, an aerial photo of the site. There's Rose Cottage, I think, there. Parking there, and the existing flat-roofed outbuildings here, and a hedge fronting the road. Next, you can see a slide showing the block plan of the existing outbuilding here. There are some other sheds on site, very minor potting sheds and such like, and there's the Rose Cottage and the neighbouring properties here and here. Okay, here you see the footprint of the proposed buildings in red. It doesn't appear to be too much larger than that of the existing building. I think it's about 0.48 metres squared larger than the less than the existing building, so its footprint's less than that of the existing building, and it's away from the hedge, so the hedge will be retained, affording it some screening. Here you see the existing buildings that are to be demolished, outbuildings. They don't hold any particular great design merits, considering it's a listed building. They sit in the grounds of a listed building. We'll move on. They have a maximum height of about 2.75 metres. And we'll move on to the next slide, which is the existing floor plan. You can see it consists of log store, shed A and shed B, fairly standard outbuildings. Here we have the proposed elevations of the new outbuilding, and it still retains these sort of 3 or 4 uses within it. They are all ancillary to the main dwelling, and this building would be higher than the existing building, but only by 0.7 of a metre, so not even a metre. That would be the main garden room here, which would be the highest point, and it would bring it from 2.75 metres at its highest currently to 3.45 metres at its highest here. And there is the proposed floor plan. It's similar. You can see the dotted line, which is the floor plan of the previous outbuilding, and you'll note that this is smaller than that of the existing building. It's higher, but the actual footprint is less than that of the existing building. It retains 2 or 3 uses like the past one did, and they would all be ancillary to the main Rose Cottage. I think they're going to be used for things like hobbies room, small shed for storing garden tools and the like, and a garden room. Okay, here we have the matters of principle and technical opinion and the matters of judgment. So we'll start with the matters of principle and technical opinion. They are the principle of development. In this case, the principle of development is that the site is located within the green belt, outside any defined settlement, and here there is a general presumption against inappropriate development, which is by definition harmful and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Also, great weight needs to be given to the fact that it's in the AOMB and AGLV. And we have matters of judgment here, that it's in the green belt. As I've stated previously, it is the footprint of the building is 0.45 of a metre less than that of the existing building. While it is higher than that of the existing building, it's only higher by 0.7 of a metre. And as such, the council do not consider the proposed building to be materially larger than that of the existing building. We need to look at the visual impact and impact on the landscape character. You may have noted I pointed out there was a hedge to the front of the site. The current building can't be seen from the road, whereas the new building you will see some of the ridge above the 3 metre high hedge to the front of the property. We do not consider that to be materially harmful on the landscape character of the area. I must point out that the existing listed building sits within the Sandhills Conservation Area, and the Council's Heritage Officer does not consider the proposal to have a materially harmful impact on the conservation area. Also, we need to have mind on the heritage assets, as I've stated. One of them is the conservation area and the other is the listed building. And I note the increased ridge height and the design of the building is in part due to the need to maintain the heritage assets of the listed building, and many discussions were had with the Council's Heritage Officer about its design, and that's why it looks the way it does and why it's slightly higher, to allow for the cat slide roof and other such details. So the council does not consider that it would have an impact on any of the heritage assets, i.e. the conservation area or the listed building. And finally, if we look at the impact on the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties, it is set significant distance from the neighbouring properties, and there is hedging, and there is also fencing in between, close wall fencing of about 1.5 to 1.8 metres between the properties, and as such we do not consider that it would have a materially harmful effect on the neighbouring properties due to its modest scale, and it's very similar in scale to what's there already, and as such the council would be minded to approve the application with conditions as set out on pages 110 and 111 of the agenda. However, I must also bring to your attention the revised recommendation, and the revised recommendation no longer includes the need to take into account the views of the Parish Council, as they have already been taken into account, as they do not object to this application. And I also must remind you that the application would have otherwise been dealt with under delegated powers had it not been one of Councillor Mr Else's applications. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Mr Martin.
Mr Chairman, this looks very straightforward. I can see no reason why we shouldn't go straight to a recommendation. It's almost a like for like, slightly smaller footprint, slightly higher up, and we should go straight for a recommendation.
Going to the recommendation then, as set out on the update sheet. Are we agreed? Thank you very much. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience as a late start. Have a safe journey home.